Welcome back, Inebri-art. This is Andy as always. And last episode, we recorded our first episode in our new podcast studio, but today we're back on Zoom because I feel like Zoom is firmly implanted itself in all of our lives. And today I have two guests. I'm joined by Scott Lever and Adrienne Kress of Devil Comes at Night. Um, let's just give us the elevator pitch synopsis of what the movie's about. I mean, I read it on IMDb, but
Yeah, well, I guess Scott here, in case you didn't know this wasn't Adrian. I'm the director, co-writer with Adrian and Ryan Allen, who stars in the movie as well. The elevator pitch, it's a horror movie. Basically, a washed-up boxer must fight for his life when he finds himself trapped in his father's farmhouse by a local cannibal cult.
The classic local cannibal cults, you know.
yeah, everyone's
We all
got
have
right?
one,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
I actually saw cannibals and my brain auto replaced it with zombies, and I'm like, oh, another zombie film, and I'm like, oh no, it's not. It says cannibals.
Now, to be fair, we are both big fans of the zombie genre, so
I do love it.
not averse to that. But
yeah.
no, these are living cannibals.
So, Adrian, you wrote it. Scott, did you say you wrote as well, or just?
I was a co-writer on it for
Okay.
with Adrian and Ryan. Yeah.
So, who had the initial idea? Like, how did it come about? I'm fast. I love working in a collaborative way, so I'm fascinated how like you guys perform that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I knew I wanted to make a horror movie, so I think I knew I wanted to work with Ryan Allen, who's the other lead in the movie, and I wasn't quite sure how we were going to do it. So I approached Adrian, I approached Ryan, and I had sort of this spark of an idea of sort of the anti-invasion movie. So as opposed to a horror movie where people are trying to break into a house, what if you spent a night in a house where you slowly realize people are trying to lure you out of a house?
Oh, okay.
And so we kind
And
of had,
also,
yeah, go ahead.
no, just how on earth you can make that suspenseful. Like if you're safe in the house, yay, you win. 2-second movie and scene, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I definitely would say Scott was sort of the genesis for the idea. And not to tell too many tales out of school, but Scott and I are actually married. So
Yeah.
he's stuck with me in this apartment, and especially at the time during COVID. So that was when we wrote it and that all started. So I'm a writer. We're all actors as well, including Scott. But I'm a writer. I write novels for children and teens. And I've recently been writing the Bendy and the Ink Machine books, which is a video game series, and I write the tie-ins, and that's a horror game series. And that was sort of my first foray into horror. So when Scott was sort of mulling over this horror idea, I was like, oh, me too. I would like to too. So yeah, and as he said, he's worked with Ryan before. He directed and produced a few series that Ryan has also been in. But this was like, no, we love this guy. We need his voice. We need his just his energy. So yeah, so we all then created a little team.
Do you think being in lockdown led to part of that idea of being kind of like in a house, quote unquote, safe and being lured out?
I'm sure that it didn't hurt to be in a similar circumstance in a way. Funny enough, like it was kind of a love letter to like not the original Night of the Living Dead and sort of those other classic horror like Trapped in a Cabin in the Woods. Because I think COVID sort of helped give us that initial push, because a lot of us, I work as film crew, a lot of my friends are film crew. And I think that was really helpful because when we all lost our gigs, when COVID shut everything down, we were kind of like, all right, let's just get everybody together and go up into the woods and make a horror movie, and we'll make our own work and we'll just have a blast making this film. And that was a big part of how we were able to do it, was the lockdowns. And of course, we had to follow COVID protocols, which were extremely strict at the time. So our crew was very, very tiny. And for example, our costume designer and our production designer had to do it basically remotely. They weren't even in the same town because we could only have so many people on set at any given time. It was very challenging, but it's one of the reasons we got it done.
Yeah, it's COVID was such a weird thing, and I remember at the time we were talking right before we started recording that, I'm a visual artist and I draw. I had zero like creative motivation during COVID. It just like really hit me. And I just, I sat around and watched Tiger King and whatever the hell else people were binging at the
Well,
time.
who didn't?
Yeah. But I feel like when I look back, that was the moment, I got laid off from my day job and I was just like, well, now's the time to make Inebri-art become what it can be. And, so I'm just curious how many people like have had that where it almost gave them time that they needed to kind of work on something.
Well, I mean, it's actually really fascinating because on the one hand, it was a psychological mindfuck, lockdowns
sure.
and being, on the other hand, at least for me. So as I said, so as Scott just said, he works in films, so he's out and about. I'm at home in my little garret writing books, right? Mm-hmm. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I was very much like that scene from, I saw this meme going around of the Hulk from the first Avengers film where he's like, the secret is I'm always angry kind of thing, but they changed it to I'm always anxious. And I was like, I'm super mellow at the beginning of COVID because I'm like, welcome to my world. Living in a little ball of anxiety in your home. Is that just not what everyone does? So in a weird way, at the beginning of the pandemic, it honestly, for me, it almost felt like business as usual. But what ended up actually happening with COVID, aside from it being a moment where we had, so a lot of the people involved in this film are filmmakers and actors who are working constantly. Mm-hmm. So we suddenly had access to this incredible talent that might not have otherwise been available at the same time, in the same place and to create. But the other thing was Scott and I got married in the fall of 2019. We were very lucky that we didn't choose the spring of 2020 like we were thinking. And we couldn't go on our honeymoon. We wanted to go to the UK. Oh. We have friends and relatives there, and we couldn't. So we were like, well, you want to make a movie instead? So I personally felt like I knew I'd met my soulmate when we decided to take our honeymoon funds to make this movie. And weirdly, that's also thanks to COVID. We couldn't travel, so we decided to make a movie instead.
I love you so much. Let's make a movie where people eat each other.
Yes. It's
pretty much how it went.
Classic. Yeah. Like, I think there's a Jane Austen book about that, right?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. That's so funny. So was it a benefit or more challenging to work being a married couple?
Scott.
Sorry if anybody couldn't see, I sipped my tea there. No, it was a genuine benefit. I mean, we work really well together. And I think it helps that, we're both in the arts. We both come from a creative background. So we have a vocabulary to work together, and we also know when to shut that off and just be home and a married couple, and there's no work talk, and like we're very good with that. And it was actually wonderful because with making film, you kind of live together, you kind of become a family. So we had
all these extra kids all of a sudden. We were mom and dad, and then we had,
I mean, I think they'd argue that they got the extra kids and we got extra parents, but
yes, it's in some ways, especially. Yeah. I agree. And it's not also the first time we've worked together. In fact, before we even were dating, we started as friends. We met the way all actors do. We met in a play, and we were friends first. And then I actually auditioned for one of the projects that he and Sean Ahmed, who plays Jay in the film and is also a co-producer on The Devil Comes at Night. And the two of them have also co-produced and co-directed many things together. And I auditioned for one of their things, and they actually hired me, which is nice. Otherwise, I'd still be bitter to this day. I hold grudges. And so, yeah, I've been directed by them. I've worked with them. We've already had that relationship before we had a relationship. I'm not sure it is for everybody. Like, we have such a foundation where that's just part of our relationship since the beginning. But I don't know if everybody could do it. Although I want to pretend that we're like Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh, like I feel like they really are
cannibal movies, yes.
Well, I think that just having that mental wherewithal to be like, all right, we're shutting off work now, and
and watching movies, because we shut down the movie making to watch movies.
To watch movies. Hey. But yeah, so me and my business partner, like we were best friends before, and so not, like it's so hard to be like, even when you're like, oh, we're gonna go do something else, be like, oh, did I forgot to tell you this email? And it's so hard to kind of just shut that off.
It really is, and I'm not saying we're perfect at it, but it's sort of necessary. And I think regardless of even relationships you have with people as a creator, I mean, I don't think sometimes people who aren't in the creative field understand this. It's like, it's not just about working hours. It's not 9 to 5 and then you go home and you do your thing. You're constantly thinking and creating and being inspired or being frustrated or taking it with you, the weight of everything with you. So it is sort of almost a 24/7 obsession. You kind of go a little nutty as a creative person, to be fair. And so when you're already constantly thinking, and then your partner is constantly thinking, to turn all of that off and to just sort of have no movie talk, tonight, we're just going to have a date night and go out and hang out and stuff. You do actually have to articulate it. You have to be specific. You can't just hope the other person can read your mind. And that's where communication comes in. And fortunately, when you're married to a director, they're very good at communication. So that's good.
Sometimes.
But I think it's interesting because what they say, lucky in podcasting, unlucky in love. But no, it's like everyone I've ever dated, I think, has been what I would call a non-creative person, and it frequently, even indirectly, was a bit of an issue, because they didn't get the mindset and kind of.
It's about a balance. It's like I have some friends who are very creative and they have partners who are not in that industry, but where it works is the respect for it. It's easy to be dismissive of, oh, you're just making up stories. Well, that's fun. I have to, go sit.
I have a quote real job. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And this is not to negate the challenges of every job. And as actors, we've done a lot of other jobs. We know the challenges with any kind of working, right? But the key thing is respect. And I think that's what you have to have with relationships. I think that's also what you have on a film set. I think, like Scott was saying earlier, with how small our crew was because of COVID protocols. And it's also a very small cast. It's a cast of, oh gosh, 7 or 8. It's a very small cast. It was such a collaborative experience. And I think what Scott does really well as a director is he has this patience to listen and really take on other people's ideas and really give things a try, and putting any potential ego, not to say you have a big ego, Scott, but any ego, we all have an ego, aside and listening, communicating. I think that is a huge boon. And I think he's very good at that. And I also think it shows in the film. I think you can, I don't know, maybe just because we were there, but I really think when you watch it, you can see a real ensemble. And even if you don't really understand how that ensemble works behind the camera, I don't know, vibes, man. I think you can tell.
I feel like sometimes the most creative things come out from having, an extreme limitation. Do you feel like having that small crew was an actual benefit opposed to having, a bigger, more, robust team?
I mean, I like the saying, more money, more problems. And it is true in film as well. Like bigger budgets just mean newer, different problems. Like I've worked on, I worked in a production office for Star Trek and Murdoch Mysteries, some bigger shows, some smaller shows. And the challenges will always find you in filmmaking. I find that there's different challenges for example, a little indie movie like ours, where you you don't have a grip team basically, and like I'm helping move a light, or like, you know, our DP is basically also lighting. It's definitely those are their challenges there. But then once you get up into the high massive budget shows, they have their own challenges, and I think that's why film people are just such incredible, hardworking crew and cast people, because it is challenging, and it is long days, and it is hard work, and you have to kind of execute excellence at all times despite whatever challenges come up. And it just makes me appreciate how good our crew was at the time. So I think if we had more money, we would have had different challenges, basically.
I think sometimes from the writing end of things, having some parameters, even greater creativity can come out of that. I've written books that are entirely my own invention. I've written, you know, tie-ins like the Bendy books, as I already said. And I find having those limitations make me super creative and really, you know, get the synapses firing. And I think with this movie, going into it knowing how small our budget was, knowing pretty early on that we were going to shoot at my parents' cottage in a single location, and knowing that going into writing. So the script was written specifically for that space. It wasn't written for a house in a woods. It was written knowing that there was going to be a wall of windows and that it goes up to the second floor and there's a balcony across and all of that stuff. In a way that actually, you know, sparks more creativity and knowing, okay, so a lot of this is going to be Ryan by himself, and then eventually me and Ryan. And so this is going to be a character study on top of being sort of this action-filled horror movie, and that then dictates structure and what people are going to say and everything, and also it dictates casting, because everyone, I think every single actor in this cast has a theater background, and it really is a bit like a play. This movie, it's a one location. There's lots of dialogue. And so you needed to have actors who had that as a strength, and everybody was amazing. And also we happened to have two who were opera singers. So they would make up songs while we would cut, including Ryan, the lead. So I sort of think we should turn it into an opera someday. I think that's my personal thought.
A musical cannibal movie?
Comes at night. The opera.
Yeah. I think there's actually a cannibal musical out there called Cannibal the Musical. I think it's like the Evil Dead guy. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I think that does sound right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, they beat you to it.
Shucks. But no, it definitely like taking like what, like, you know, obviously we have multiple locations, but, you know, different parts of the house and stuff like that. But just being able to keep, because film is a visual medium, keeping things visually interesting as well when the character is trapped somewhere, and like finding ways to use the location in interesting ways, like that sort of budget and those sort of limitations you give yourself are sort of a requirement to get pretty creative.
And our DP, Nelson Rogers, who we've mentioned before, is just fantastic, and I think he would probably say likewise about it being like, you know, solving problems can breed inspiration, can breed innovation, kind of thing. Because the two of you, Scott, just like watching the two of them sit and just talk through shots, I think it's I am a co-producer on it, but I feel like I'm allowed to say I think it's a really beautifully shot film, and I'm really impressed.
Now, you were talking about, you know, visuals and whatnot, and I have to say this took me an embarrassing long time to realize what your shirt is. Your shirt is the carpet from The Shining.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, it is. It was a gift from my wife, actually.
That is very stylish.
I also bought myself two pairs of earrings. So one, the pattern that he's wearing right now, the carpet, and then one that is a key on one ear, and then the sort of the key thingy attached to it that tells you your room number in a hotel.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Keychain, is that what it's called?
I would think, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a writer. I know words. So yeah, and it has, and it's that as well. Yeah, it's a good shirt though, right? That's a good shirt.
It's pretty sharp.
It's my favorite horror movie. I just love it. So it's a big fan.
Yeah. Adrienne, do you have a Richard Gorey shirt? Is that
Yes, and Edward Gorey. I have
Edward Gorey? Sorry.
Yes, Edward Gorey. I have the Ghastly Crumb Tinies.
Nice. He is
Yes.
a local person here.
Is he?
Yeah, he's there's like a one of his houses is on Cape Cod, and
I am
like
obsessed.
a cat sanctuary now or something weird like that.
Well, he did illustrate cats. There is a version of Eliot's T.S. Eliot's Cats that he has illustrated. I love him. I have a Dracula theater. Like, you can buy this Dracula theater that you sort of put together like a little
Cool.
paper character, a little tiny. No, his art. I mean, speaking because you're an artist, you would know. I just think his stuff is amazing. I have his books, and the Ghastly Crumb Tinies are so good. And my favorite is N is for Neville, who died of ennui.
I got that for my youngest, I think 2 Christmases ago, maybe 3.
It's so good. And also, I think my favorite of his books is The Doubtful Guest, because I just love this random creature walking around and everyone being puzzled by it. I don't know. I like a good deal of absurdity in my writing.
Well, you guys seem
read it, and then Adrienne sat me down, I think when we were still dating, and
I read you the book.
And
it's
read it
short.
to me on the couch. No, you need to read this now.
It takes you 10 minutes. It's like less. It's just a little picture book, but it's so charming. But yeah, his art, the elongated, the characters. And you were saying that you're doing these single line drawings right now. And even if Gorey isn't a single line drawing artist, you could conceivably, like, there is a simplicity to his art that
for sure
almost break down to that. I do. Big fan.
So you guys are obviously big horror fans. Like, what is it? And even why cannibals? Like, why was that where you guys landed?
I mean, for me, like, I grew up like
eating
horror.
humans.
Yeah, with inner demons and horror. Yeah, my life was I grew up in a haunted house. Like, for me, I think horror is such an interesting genre because it introduces you to a part of yourself you would never meet unless you were in a really dire situation. Like, those emotions you feel are meant to be hidden away until your life is in danger. And horror is just like this amazing playground that lets you shake hands with that side of yourself in a safe environment, and you sort of become a more whole person because you've learned a little bit more about yourself and you've got to experience something safely that you would never experience. And I just think that's so special when it comes to horror. It's like a amazing thrill ride, and I've always loved it.
I've studied a lot of random things when I was at university, and one of the classes I loved so much was architecture from 1750 to 1900, like a very quick window. And in that time period, that's sort of when they coined. The term sublime existed obviously as a word, but it was a very specific term that they used, the sublime, which was this idea of creating almost a horror feeling, like a sense of awe to the point of fear, but that it was still safe. So if you would look, for example, up at like a Gothic cathedral, and they use this a lot in religious iconography, where you look up and it's looming over you and towering, and some of the figures, gargoyles and stuff, can look quite dangerous and scary. And you would feel that sense of fear, but it was also kind of exciting, and it would inspire awe. And especially in a religious context, it would bring you in. And another, contemporary version that would be like Scott insinuated, a roller coaster, like a literal, I think there's something about the human spirit that wants to feel these feelings, but only in a safe way. We don't really want to be being chased by a chainsaw, murdering person thing. I don't know. Maybe some people do. That's you. Fair enough. Don't want to shame anybody.
But we'll go to haunted attractions and pretend.
Exactly. Yeah. There's, and I think what Scott's saying about you can learn a bit more about yourself, and you get to sort of feel feelings. I also just think that there's a lot of, in any good movie, you're going to have good stories and interesting themes and conversations that you can talk about beyond just feeling scared. You can have, Get Out, right? And it can be scary because it's scary, but also just what it's the subject matter in and of itself is also kind of pretty terrifying. So I think there's all of that. For me, I come to horror very sideways because I'm a bit of a chicken.
Okay.
I have to admit, but I think that's good because it means I can really, I'm like, Scott will be like, is this scary? And I'm like, yes. It's sort of like if you're so good with spice that you can't even taste the spice anymore. And
Oh,
like,
right.
Hot.
Yeah.
That's hot. So my sort of way in has always been actually through, again, with the kidlit and stuff, adventure books and these sort of life and death situations. And a lot of children's movies have horror moments. People talk especially about the second Wizard of Oz, but even the first one, but The Return to Oz is an absolutely terrifying film, but technically not a horror film, right? But it had a lot of horror tropes. You've got, a woman who's switching out heads. It's, the electrocution stuff at the beginning. But even The Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch of the West.
And the flying monkeys. And
that was infamous. Like children were terrified of her as an actor from that point on. So I come in from that direction of things because I was always very, very scared. But I realized as I was getting older that I was accidentally consuming horror and I didn't realize it. So a lot of it is in the Jurassic Park or Jaws or Alien, an animal attacking a person style horror I really enjoyed. That sounds wrong, but I did. So I sort of came from that world, and then I've gotten more into but there's certain types of horrors that still really freak me out. And I'll tell you, filming it and writing it doesn't make it any better. I was in a horror movie. I was in a horror movie for Sci-Fi, Never Knock, and I was in the makeup chair for 5 hours. Getting this, so my character had burned alive in a car accident. I was the character's mom, and then it's like a horror thing. So she gets visions, and I show up and stuff. So I'm like, no hair, bald cap, the whole body is burned and charred. Incredible makeup, and it was so fun just to watch the makeup artists work. And also, often when you're called onto set, you're sitting around for hours and hours and hours until they need you. I was there in the chair and then on set right away because I was there for 5 hours. Anyway. The first day of shooting, after they took everything off, and I got home at like 6 a.m. because, of course, so much horror is overnight, including ours. Devil Comes at Night, 13 days in a row, overnights. That plays with your brain. I got home at 6 a.m. and I felt this feeling of dread just in my body, like sort of that weird shaky and pit in the stomach. And then I realized it was because I was scared of myself. I was scared
looking at yourself.
Me. I had looked at myself for so long in that mirror, like I had scared myself. So for some reason, even knowing the behind the scenes stuff does not make me less of a wuss.
It's so funny that you I like that you talk about that because you read so many stories about actors getting stuck in roles, and it's really the only job where you change who you are basically. And
it's so much
it's got to be. Is there part of it? Is it exhausting? I feel like those days where I don't want to talk to people, but I have to because of work, and you're like, hey, and at the end of the day, you're like, I'm so exhausted just from putting up that front. Like, is it physically? Well,
actually, that is actually a really interesting question. I think when you're at sort of like doing a professional, like if you're doing theater or film, and everybody around you is a professional, and you're all career artists, right? It's a little different because you are showing up for work. So people do give you your space. And I think you do as an actor sometimes, because like some of the scenes between Ryan and I, Ben and Amy, there's some pretty emotional things that happen and these big emotional beats. And sometimes you need space to just get there and to process it, or just the two of us working together on lines even, So generally people understand what is being asked of you, but there is what I think is more interesting is that you will be left alone. And then suddenly you're like on, especially with film. It's like I said, most often you get called to set. You're not in the chair for 5 hours. You're maybe in the chair for 20 minutes. You go back to the trailer and then you are not needed. I showed up at like 5 p.m. My call was 5 p.m. I wasn't on set once. This is a different movie. The movie Wolves, directed by David Hayter. I wasn't on set until like 4 a.m.
Oh, geez.
And so I have makeup and hair and pretty stuff. So it's not like you want to get it like, okay, it's gross, so it's fine if it's a bit messy. But it was just, no, I have to, but I'm there overnight and I'm waiting and waiting. And then they call you and you are on. So that immediate switch, I think, can be, one of the biggest challenges. And I think what most actors feel, and coming at it, from now the producing side and also just watching Scott and being very, very close, because again, living and working in this space, the crew and the people behind the scenes are working so hard and such long hours, and you're maybe bored in your trailer, but if you aren't ready to go the second you're on set, like your job as an actor is to be ready when they need you, because those people have been working for hours and hours and hours prepping absolutely everything. And it's only respectful as an actor to be like, all right, I'm here, I've got my lines down, let's go. Because right now I'm probably the least important cog in this machine, sort of thing. Yeah.
So kind of circling back to Devil Comes at Night, and with such a small crew, I'm assuming there were some special effects and just curiosity. What did you use as a human substitute for scenes where they were eaten?
Oh my goodness. Well, it was like, I don't want to give all our tricks away, but some of it's real latex, and sort of our a wonderful makeup artist and VFX artist, Jenna. So you would have fake skin and fake flesh, and then sometimes for wounds and things like that, sometimes that was post, and would add it digitally afterwards.
Digitally, yeah.
And then sometimes we would add, like we would have tubing with air, like for squibs and blood shots and things like that. And then sometimes we would just come to our amazing VFX artist, Avi, and be like, Avi, more blood, man. More.
It's actually, honestly, it was really interesting watching Avi do, like, because we did have some pretty decent, wounds and makeup done. But again, going back to the time thing, and all the restrictions we had on us, once in camera, once we saw the result, we're like, oh no, we need it to be even gorier, right? But we didn't have a chance to sort of look in camera and then go back. It was a quick fix. So watching what Avi does and seeing how it looks real. And I know this is dumb because I watch a lot of movies and every movie has VFX in it, and I watch a lot of big action, green screen. It just blew my mind thinking about how many shots I must see when I'm watching a movie that even I, who has some sense of knowledge of this, this field, don't even realize have been touched, because some things just are small and they feel like they would be totally in camera, but you're like, no, wow. It's just so impressive what they can do. I don't know. I'm just saying I'm impressed.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the best visual effects are the ones you don't even notice. And I remember I was listening to some commentary that was, I don't remember if it was Ron Howard or the effects guy for Apollo 13. And there's one scene where like Tom Hanks is daydreaming and he has like the gold mask over his face shield in the helmet, and he like slides it back and you can see like the reflection of the flag and in the glass of his helmet, and it's kind of an innocuous scene. It is what it is, and whoever the commentary is with is like, yeah, there's no glass there, like that's all digital. The reflection's digital. And I blew my mind because I'm like, at no point would you ever even stop to think about it. I'm like, those are the best effects that it seems like it's there. Yeah
100%. I think that's always the goal, is like, it's not about you never want it to be that the audience be thinking about the VFX. You always just want to be telling the story. And kind of like the example I always go back to is like, we wanted to gore up someone's arm that was all like chopped up, and our VFX guy Avi was like kind of experimenting, playing with different options, and it was just literally like, if I do too much, it's going to stand out. So, but if I just add a little bit of fat in, like where the cuts are, like in the human arm, and I think, oh my god, yes, 100%. It's grotesque but perfect. Do it. Like, and I think just those little touches that just make it look real, but don't make it look too good. Like where it's like it's about nothing but, oh, what a cool effect. Oh right,
Yeah.
we're gonna move. Yeah.
Do you know how difficult it is to be a wuss and to have your husband call you in and go, all right, Avi has sent a few options. Can you look? I'm like, no. No. I did because I'm a good teammate, but no.
Have you ever had nightmares from a role or something that you've worked on?
I haven't. I will say that there is enough divide. The closest would be that story I told you where I came back home and I felt really funny. I'm like, why do I feel like this? Yeah, no, I think that's it. Yeah, no, I haven't. So that's at least something. That's at least a good thing. But I will say sometimes, now I can't think of an example. So I have had nightmares where I'm like, ooh, I'm going to use that for something.
Yeah.
So I have sourced my own subconscious.
Scott, do you get creeped out by anything? Or are you kind of that eat spicy food so much that you're just like, yeah, that was really scary?
Oh, I get creeped out all the time. There's so much good horror coming out. What I love though is that like I definitely am the kind of guy who's like, I've seen a lot of horror, so it's not the easiest thing to creep me out. So that makes it extra special when it happens. I really love it. It makes it a wonderful moment for me. And I think there's just so much good stuff coming out right now, especially like in the indie world and overseas. And like it's a great time to be a horror fan.
Yeah, gonna like plug something for myself a little bit here. We're actually, because we do so many things, and one of my favorite things to do is to help other people start something. And so the local guys started America's Hometown Horror. It's a podcast where they talk about horror movies and review horror movies and haunted attractions and whatnot. And so this year we're collaborating with a local brewery and we're doing a horror convention at Mayflower Brewery. So we're calling it Hometown Haunts and Hops.
And, that's so good.
Hops and haunts. Yeah.
These are my two favorite things.
So yeah, hit me up. We'll talk.
I love that.
Yeah, we're trying to bring in some guests, and it's really coming together, and it's so exciting. And people are so passionate about horror that, you know, way back in the day, I used to own a comic book shop, and I would do Comic Cons, and I would do horror conventions, and horror conventions were always my favorite. Everyone was happy, everyone was having fun. Weirdly, that wasn't always the case at Comic Cons, but like everyone had like this just unbridled passion for being there and like sharing, you know.
Oh, 100%. I mean, horror fans are just my favorite people. Like they're so creative, they're so passionate. And if you just look at like a lot of genres have struggled in the indie world over the years, but the one consistent has been horror. Like it's funny, me and my friend Todd, who is also he's a fight choreographer, and he did the fights on The Devil Comes at Night. We both just are constantly sending each other like the newest horror we found, and like we watch everything. It doesn't matter the budget. It's just like so fun and creative and interesting. Like I genuinely love it.
I also think horror fans, I mean, again, there's a lot, there are so many amazing fandoms, but I think what's so fascinating about horror fans is they're so much more open in some ways to the indie-ness of things.
Oh, absolutely.
Because horror's like, I don't know, maybe because people are like, why would you want to scare people? Maybe it's because it's such a, you know, the black sheep of the family, the little stepchild or whatever. But it's really great that people will watch low budget. They will watch really anything. And as long as they like the story, it's like, yeah, okay, maybe that effect wasn't 100%, or maybe, you know, okay, I can see the wires or, you know, whatever. There's such an open heart to it that if they will, you know, they will just enjoy it for what it is. And I think that's not something we get a lot of, you know, gatekeeping in fandoms, I think. And it's quite the opposite. It's like, now I'm picturing like the gates of hell. Everyone's welcome, you know, just this open flaming gate.
But they really do kind of take that like almost almost reverse, kind of being like they did such a good job for a budget of,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's really it's amazing, and even like you see it in reviews, even in professional places. There's just, I don't know, there's just such a lovely openness to the art, because it is an art.
So I'm going to steal a question from a favorite podcast of mine, and I feel like you guys are the right people to ask, because I love the antagonists in your movie as cannibals. So there's a podcast called Monster Talk. They've been guests on our show before, and so they always ask, "What's your favorite monster?" And I've always in my head been like, "Ooh, what's mine?" And mine is always humans. Humans are the most horrific thing, so that's why I love that you guys are cannibals. But what are your favorite monsters?
Oh God, that's a tough one. I
That's
mean,
like a who's your favorite kid, right?
oh, totally, because you love them all so much. I mean, do you go with like really creative, like The Thing, which was just so fun and like cool, like because it was like it never had a shape, you never really get a sense of what it looks like, and of course the practical effects were just so cool. Or like, do you go with more like humans because the true monster is within us all, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I mean, that's so tough. Adrienne, you go first.
I was gonna say, I
come
feel like I've
on.
ruined Adrian's night, because you're gonna come out and be like, "Oh, you know what I should have said."
What are your greatest fears, Adrienne?
Well, no, I think, yeah. God, let me just pour my soul out here. All right, so when you're talking about like humans are like the greatest, I monster of them all, kind of, and I actually think it's really funny, because the kinds of horror that I find very, very difficult to watch, that just sit in my soul and I have nightmares about, are twofold. There's paranormal, because I'm just like, where is it going to come from? Like my brain can't handle that. There's no logic. I'm a very logic oriented person. But the other one is the people one, is serial killers. I know women are supposedly love their true crime podcasts, not me, because it freaks me
You're
out.
the only one.
I'm the one. But it's I definitely feel that. So my issue is that scares me so much that I find it hard to even enjoy such a film. So I think, going back to what I said about sort of entering horror from the side, I'm super into the animal stuff. So I'm like Jaws, literally the shark. We just rewatched it just for fun a couple of weeks ago. I'm like, I know Spielberg keeps talking about, he's like, oh man, the shark doesn't look so great these days. I'm like, I think it still looks amazing. Like, I don't know, because sharks kind of don't look real. Like, that looks amazing to me. I would say probably for baby Adrienne, like the velociraptors in the first Jurassic Park were like kind of like
Horrifying. They absolutely were
villain.
Yeah.
And that scene
God, yeah.
in the kitchen became my absolute favorite, and that's where I realized, oh, maybe I do like being scared. I like an alien, like I like all the things I've already named. The Thing is interesting because it's just so gross that it's hard to watch. But the dog at the beginning, best actor in a horror movie.
Oh my God, what a great dog actor.
So yeah. So that's my wishy-washy answer to that question. Now it's your turn, Scott. It's back to you.
Yeah,
You've had time.
I guess for me, I'm gonna say I don't know if you call it the hotel in The Shining, but like all that encompasses, because it's just so upsetting, and you just feel like you are trapped with this family alone, except you're not, in this like evil building full of ghosts. So I guess it's sort of a haunted hotel sort of thing, but that is by far my favorite monster, because the hotel is almost this living being with its own will. And so that one knocks out of the park for me.
I was also going to say, like, I totally agree with you, which is a good thing, because we have to hang out later. But
I mean,
like,
literally, we're just in two separate rooms right now.
I know, like, he's just like right over there. I'm hoping in the podcast you can't hear the echoes of our voices. But it's so interesting, because one of the things that Stephen King, took so many issues with the Kubrick Shining, right? One of them was that the hotel was so not aesthetically how he had in his brain, and evidently in the 90s miniseries that's a lot closer to what he had thought. But I just find that so fascinating, because I'm so agree with Scott that literally the decision to use those interiors and to completely change that aesthetic and make it that massive sort of cavernous space is a freaking brilliant choice. And I think in an interesting way, it's sort of similar to like, oh God, not comparing us to, but what I'm saying is that like where we're like,
let's the film The Devil Comes at Night.
Let's flip the the people trapped in a cabin situation, right? And give us the challenge of how do you make it scary when people are trying to get you out of a space where you're safe and they can't, come in. I think it's interesting to make such a cavernous, modern, clean, attractive. Again, it looks dated to us because it's older, but very contemporary aesthetic space, creepy versus the older hotel, which is what I think King was initially writing with, like this like darker interiors and the Gothic, and the wood and all of that. I actually think that that's quite an incredible feat to make a brightly lit, large space so terrifying.
And it's such a huge space in such a wide open space, but still feels claustrophobic.
Exactly.
Yes.
So Devil Comes at Night, June 6th, it's out on VOD, right?
Yes.
Correct. Yes.
Correct.
I wrote notes correctly. And that's pretty much everywhere you can stream movies, I would assume. Nice. Yeah. So thank you guys. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah. And anytime you guys have stuff, feel free to reach out and we'll
awesome.
Can't wait to see what you guys are working on next. Yeah, books or whatever.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Awesome. Very, very fun.
Awesome. And for our listeners, we'll see you guys again next Monday. And thanks for checking out the show today, listeners. If you enjoyed the content today, you can go over to patreon.com/Inebri-art to support the show. You can join over there for just a few dollars a month and help us provide this fun content that you just checked out. You can also email us at Inebri-art.com with your questions, complaints, and concerns, or you can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art or at Inebri-art6 on Instagram. And also don't forget to check out our other shows, Bar Talk Podcast, Old Colony Cast, Inebri-art, and all the other shows on the Inebri-art Network, which you can find at Inebri-art.com. Thanks again for listening.